midpoint of Dragon's current orbit around Earth. This deorbit burn will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splashdown off the coast of California near San Diego this morning. Splashdown is planned for 8:33 a.m. Pacific time or 11:33 a.m. Eastern time.
And then from there, Dragon will maneuver to the correct attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized lower part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or bottom section of Dragon, where the heat shield is located. In order to expose the heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric re-entry, we'll jettison the trunk. After a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9 back on March 14th, Crew-10 made their way on board Dragon to the International Space Station and will complete 148 days in space upon mission completion with Splashdown later today. NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers, in the center there on your screen, conducted one spacewalk during their 5 months in space on May 1st. During that spacewalk, they relocated a space station communications antenna and the initial mounting bracket installation steps for an IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, that will arrive on a future SpaceX Commercial Resupply Services mission. Crew-10 began packing for their voyage home about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with the recently arrived Crew-11 team after they docked to the space station a few days ago on August 2nd.
For return operations such as this, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety, the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Now, multiple NTMs, or Notice to Mariners, are issued in advance of and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones.
And again, we want to stress to the public the need to respect the safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in Dragon, as well as the teams working to recover them from the water and the safety of those that come too close. For the safety of our crew and your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch, and we'll bring you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming today.
Exactly. So let's take a minute to meet our returning crew. Our commander, NASA astronaut Anne McClain, is your Crew-10 commander. Born and raised in Spokane, Washington, NASA selected McClain as an astronaut candidate in 2013. Crew-10 is her second space flight after launching aboard the Soyuz MS-11 in 2018 and serving as flight engineer on the International Space Station for Expeditions 58 and 59. In total, she has now spent 352 days in space and completed 3 spacewalks, totaling 18 hours and 52 minutes. McClain is a West Point graduate and colonel in the U.S. Army, a highly decorated Master Army aviator. McClain has more than 2,000 flight hours in 20 different aircraft. McClain is also an avid rugby player and former member of the USA Rugby Women's National Team. She currently lives in Houston, Texas.
And then next up is the pilot for Crew-10, who is NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers. The Crew-10 mission was the first space flight for Ayers, and she completed 148 days in microgravity, and during that time she participated in one spacewalk, totaling 5 hours and 44 minutes outside of the orbiting laboratory. She is a major in the U.S. Air Force and the first member of NASA's 2021 astronaut class named to a crew. A graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Ayers served as an instructor pilot and mission commander in the T-38 Adair and F-22 Raptor, leading multinational and multi-service missions worldwide. She has more than 1,400 total flight hours, including more than 200 in combat, and Nichole has a twin and was born in San Diego, California, so it'll be a little bit of a homecoming with that splashdown off the coast of San Diego later today.
This is the second mission to the space station for JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi after launching aboard the Soyuz MS-01 mission in 2016 as a flight engineer for Expeditions 48 and 49 and has now spent a total of 263 days in space. Onishi received a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Aeronautical and Space Engineering from the University of Tokyo and soon embarked on a career in aviation with All Nippon Airways in Tokyo. He was selected as an astronaut candidate by JAXA in 2009, and during his stay on the space station, he became the first Japanese astronaut to capture the Cygnus spacecraft in space. When he's not training, Onishi enjoys flying, playing the saxophone, movies, and hiking.
And then last but not least, to round it all out, is mission specialist and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. This is also his first flight, similar to Ayers, and he will have completed 148 days in space after this mission. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, Peskov was a co-pilot on the Boeing 757 and 767 aircraft for airlines Nordwind and Ikar. Assigned as a test cosmonaut in 2020, he has additional experience in skydiving and zero-gravity training.
And up next, Dragon will perform a slew or maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and then deorbit burn and then perform the deorbit burn itself. This deorbit burn is the last time the forward Dracos will ignite, which are the 4 thrusters located on the top of the spacecraft underneath the nose cone. Now, the deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of San Diego, California this morning, and we are expecting that deorbit burn to begin in about 15 minutes or so from now.
And once that burn does start, it is expected to last about 17 and a half minutes. So it's a pretty long burn to align for its splashdown later today and get prepared for re-entry. And then after we have that deorbit burn, there will be quite a few events in rapid succession after that. So we'll have the claw separation, the trunk separation before we have entry. And then after that, we will also, or right before entry, actually, we'll have that loss of signal that's expected for about 7 or so minutes. And then we'll reacquire signal, and that's just due to the plasma buildup as they re-enter Earth's atmosphere to conclude their 5-month mission aboard the International Space Station. So there on your screen, you're seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne, which is actually situated right behind us. So the teams are preparing for the re-entry deorbit operations. And just before we joined you live on today's broadcast, they actually conducted a go, no-go poll for the deorbit burn sequence. And so the teams did poll go to proceed with that deorbit burn. The weather is continuing to look great off of the coast of San Diego, California. Along with the team there in Mission Control, there's teams that are getting ready to actually recover the spacecraft and the crew. So those boats and those teams are already headed out and getting staged at the splashdown location. And once we have splashdown again, that's targeted for 8:33 a.m. Pacific later today, 11:33 a.m. Eastern time. After we have splashdown, there's quite a few events that have to happen to actually get the crew hoisted up onto the recovery boat and then out of the capsule. And that whole process takes about 45 minutes or so before the hatches can be open, and then we can greet the crew back on the boat. So the first steps in that recovery process, we will have 2 fast boats that go out there. They do some initial safety checks and safe the spacecraft. And then after that is done, the recovery boat, it takes about 30 minutes for it to reach the splashdown location. They'll start safing the spacecraft, get it all geared up so that it can then be hoisted onto the recovery ship. And the recovery ship today is the Shannon. So a lot is happening to bring these astronauts home. It's a huge team with a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and if you're following along at the bottom of your screen, you can see the time to splashdown. We're about an hour and 7 minutes or so away from the expected splashdown time.
And this is actually the first West Coast splashdown for a NASA crew.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting milestone after all those operations have been shifted from the East Coast, off the coast of Florida, moving over to California. So now with Crew-10, comprised of Anne McClain, Nichole, Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov, ready to deorbit and splash down back on planet Earth. Of course, they are heading to one of the 3 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of California, either Los Angeles Oceanside or San Diego. Of course, today they are targeting the site at San Diego. And spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. And for those of you following along, as I just mentioned, today's splashdown does mark the first Dragon recovery of a NASA crew on the West Coast.
Yeah, exactly. After 6 years of successful recovery operations off the East Coast, we've moved all Dragon recovery operations to the West Coast. The From 2 and Axiom 4 private astronaut missions were among the first to splashdown off the coast of California after our return to the West Coast. NASA and SpaceX jointly selected our splashdown zone location from one of these 3 sites off the coast of California, and today the primary recovery site is San Diego, as we've been mentioning. This selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members. We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for reentry. The time from undocked to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39 hours.
And of course, today's phasing from undocking yesterday is about 17 and a half hours. So they undocked yesterday at 3:15 p.m. Pacific with the splashdown today at 8:33 a.m. So getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. And right there on your screen, you're actually seeing a great live look inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as the crew continues to prepare for those deorbit and entry operations. You're seeing them all suited up, and the closest view on your screen right there is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
Dragon SpaceX deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes.
SpaceX, please, 5 minutes. Crew is ready to return to the atmosphere.
SpaceX copies. We are excited to welcome you home.
And there we just heard some communications between the core or the crew operations resource engineer who is staged here in SpaceX's Mission Control in Hawthorne, between the Crew-10 astronauts currently aboard the Dragon spacecraft, confirming that they are going to begin the deorbit sequence in about 5 minutes from now. So things are really starting to get geared up. And there in that view on your screen, you're seeing an over-the-shoulder look between the pilot and the commander. So again, the pilot is Nichole Ayers and the commander is and McClain, both NASA astronauts for today's mission. And back to the phasing that we were talking a little bit about. So trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities. Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in, and that we'll need to avoid.
Yeah, exactly. And weather is something that we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks from the space station. So for Crew-10's return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone. And that's both for the safety of the crew inside of Dragon as well as the recovery teams that are on the water.
And we're also looking at things like wind speeds. We need those to be less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute those recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly the Crew-10 astronauts to California. And once Dragon began flying free yesterday after undocking, there were a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed toward the primary site of San Diego or head to the alternate sites or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we were in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home and commits Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And again, we just had that final go, no-go poll about 20 minutes ago, and that was to commit Dragon to the deorbit burn to set it up for a splashdown off the coast of San Diego, California.
Yeah, and we say this all the time, weather is the one thing that we can't control, and with these crew operations, there's a lot of variables that we have from the time that the Dragon spacecraft leaves the space station all the way through re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, the splashdown zone. So there's a lot of things we have to look out for, but the great part is we've got a lot of experience with this now, this being Crew-10's return home. So And we've got the new splashdown zones, which is really cool. We have different options that we can look at to make sure that the weather is always good where we're coming back and bringing the crew back home.
And those weather briefings for Crew-10's undock and splashdown actually began several days ago, basically a couple of days after Crew-11 launched and docked to the International Space Station, which took place on August 2nd. And we initially waved off of a couple of undock opportunities, and then we finally got good weather, which set us up for the undocking yesterday and splashdown today. So the teams are continuously evaluating weather, and weather is just one of those things you can't really control. So, and right now we are just under 1 hour away from splashdown, so things are starting to ramp up as we continue to bring Crew-10 home. And you were mentioning that it's the 10th operational flight for Dragon to the International Space Station. Another milestone this year for NASA is it'll be at the 25th year of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station. And in that time, a lot of science and research has been conducted, over 4,000 different research investigations across the life of the International Space Station, and things are continuing to happen during Crew-10's mission. They completed over 200 science investigations, contributing more than 600 hours of crew time to supporting that science and research aboard the International Space Station.
And speaking of the history of the space station and the crew doing experiments on the orbiting laboratory, we've also got some flight history for Dragon. Development of Dragon for Crew started with the Dragon cargo spacecraft. Dragon was designed from the beginning for flying humans to space, so even from the start, the first Dragon had a window on it, even though we didn't have people on it. Before we could fly humans, our teams implemented a number of design upgrades to make sure that both Dragon and Falcon 9 were suitable for flying people, and then put both vehicles through thousands of tests to prove their safety. Now, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers. We've been flying 4 with every single NASA crew mission. It's also capable of returning significant amount of cargo back down to Earth, which is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station. Dragon is fully autonomous, which means that it flies itself, but it does have features to fully manual override the vehicle in case of emergency. Dragon is also almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk all the way to the top of the nose cone. Dragon is comprised of 2 main elements: the spacecraft, which is designed to hold the crew and pressurized cargo, and then the unpressurized section, which is known as that trunk.
And we did just hear confirmation that the deorbit slew maneuver was just completed. And again, that maneuver sets up Dragon in the right trajectory and attitude to complete the deorbit burn. So we'll expect that deorbit burn to then start about 5 minutes from now that it's in the correct configuration. And again, once that deorbit burn does start, it'll last about 17 and a half minutes. So a relatively long burn for deorbit today. Going back to the Dragon spacecraft and a little bit more, the nose cone at the top of the spacecraft protects the docking system and also the guidance navigation control system. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, which helps SpaceX towards their reusability efforts. Opposite the nose cone is the trunk, and it provides attachment points for Falcon 9 and the Dragon spacecraft and cargo. One half of the trunk is covered in solar panels that provide power to Dragon during flight and while on the International Space Station, and the other half contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using SpaceX's new Pica tiling technology. And the trunk has aerodynamic fins, which provide stability in the event of an emergency abort. And in the event of an abort, Dragon is outfitted with 8 Super Draco thrusters, which will power the astronauts to safety, which is applicable during the launch phase of a flight. And the Dragon Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Dragon, giving the crew the ability to quickly separate from Falcon 9 and safely escape the time of launch all the way to orbit, a feature that no other spacecraft in history has possessed. Dragon is also equipped with 16 Draco thrusters used to orient the spacecraft during the mission, including apogee and perigee maneuvers, orbit adjustment, and attitude control. Each Draco thruster is capable of generating 90 pounds of force in the vacuum of space, and we will see those Draco thrusters in action in just a few minutes when it conducts that deorbit burn. And right there on your screen, you're getting a live look inside the Dragon spacecraft. Closest to the camera right there is NASA astronaut and Crew-10 commander Ann McClain, and next to her is NASA astronaut and Crew-10 pilot Nichole Ayers.
Yeah, and inside the spacecraft, it's designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. So you can see on your screen the crew members are sitting in the 4 seats, but underneath them is where they can place cargo, which is what they're utilizing the spacecraft for today. But if we needed to, we could place 3 more seats in that cargo area and fit 3 more passengers there. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be customized, or they are customized for any crew member flying on board. So their suits, as well as the seats, are a little customized to each of the crew members flying. Now, the control panel is centered between the pilot and the commander's seats and consists of 3 touchscreen displays, which we were seeing just moments ago. And this allows the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually if needed, but mostly they use them for monitoring on the flight uphill to the space station, as well as right now you could see them monitoring on those display screens as they're making their way back down to Earth.
And right now we have a little bit over a minute to go until the deorbit burn begins. So we're continuing to stand by for confirmation of that deorbit burn, and we'll provide updates once it is in progress. Following the deorbit burn, again, that is a 17.5-minute burn. There will be a few activities in rapid succession. So we'll have the claw separation, the trunk separation. We'll have a little bit of a loss of signal entry. Then we'll reacquire that signal after about 7 minutes. And then right before splashdown, we'll see those drogue and main parachutes deploy. And then we'll have splashdown off the coast of San Diego, California. Less than 55 minutes until we have that splashdown. So really ramping up here and getting excited for bringing our Crew-10 astronauts home.
Yeah, and again, you can follow along with the timeline, again, on the bottom center of your screen. That's the approximate time to splashdown of the Crew-10 members. And again, as we've been mentioning, they are just monitoring. They have been coasting for a bit since yesterday evening, but now we're coming up to all the dynamic events that they're still going to be following along and not really having to make any manual calls, but there's going to be a lot of dynamic events that they'll need to know what's happening because they're inside of the spacecraft, they're strapped into their seats, they can't really see what's going on outside of the vehicle, so they're going to be monitoring on those display screens that we were talking about earlier.
And so we do have confirmation that the deorbit burn has begun. Again, this burn is expected to last about 17.5 minutes. In the right-hand bottom corner of your screen, you can actually see the thruster firings as they take place. And as mentioned earlier, for these operations, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notes are issued to mariners in advance of and during recovery operations, and the Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. We want to continue to stress to the public the need to respect the safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in Dragon, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. For the safety of the crew and your safety, we recommend you continue to sit back and watch as we bring you live views of the astronauts' homecoming today.
Exactly. Safety is our number one priority. And as I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that those 4 bulkhead thrusters on top of Dragon will fire. Dragon Endurance has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere, but this deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site off the coast of San Diego, California. Right now, Anne, Nichole, Takuya, and Kirill are using their screens to monitor the burn duration, Draco thruster firings, and trajectory details like entry angle, spacecraft perigee, and how much distance remains until deorbit burn termination. Dragon, again, is flying itself, so all the crew has to do is stay strapped into their seats and keep an eye on how their journey is progressing.
And we are now about 2 minutes into that deorbit burn, about 15.5 minutes to go. Things continuing to go as expected, and we'll continue to provide updates on that burn and duration as it happens.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, SpaceX has been recovering Crew Dragon off the coast of the West Coast, off the coast of California. And today is NASA's first crew coming home back to the West Coast. Now, previously, NASA did do recovery operations off the West Coast, but with our NASA crew with SpaceX, we have been recovering the crew off of the East Coast previously until today. Crew-10 will be the first off of California.
Yes, it'll be an exciting milestone. And also, if you compare it a little bit to other spacecraft recoveries like Soyuz, which actually lands on land, SpaceX is a little bit unique in that aspect where we recover it in the water. So the recovery operations and things that have to happen are a little bit different. So currently aboard the International Space Station is Expedition 73. So a few days ago, there was actually a change of command ceremony where NASA astronaut Takuya Onishi handed over command to Roscosmos cosmonaut. And after departing the International Space Station yesterday, they went from 11 people on board to 7 people. So during that Crew 11, Crew 10 handover period, after Crew 11 arrived on August 2nd, there was a few days of handover to get Crew 11 up to speed on space station operations and everything they needed to know before Crew 10 departed yesterday. Again, that departure taking place at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern. So now the crew size has gone back down to 7, which is pretty standard now, except for when we have those handover periods. And we're not expecting any new crew arrivals again until the next Soyuz mission, which will be towards the end of the year. And that will also be when Expedition 74 kicks off. And also on board the International Space Station as part of Expedition 73 are NASA astronauts Johnny Kim, along with the newly arrived Zena Cardman and Mike Fink. There's also JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimiya Yui, who is also part of Crew 11, along with Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov, Alexei Zubritsky, and the newly arrived Oleg Platonov, who was also aboard Crew 11 last week.
That's quite a few crew members on the space station. I do think that it's pretty cool that we've had presence on the laboratory for the last 25 years, and we're continuing that. Even with just 7 people, there's so much science and research that they can do while they're out in space.
And if you think about it, there's been someone orbiting above your head for the last 25 years, which is truly incredible if you think about it. The deorbit burn is, of course, continuing to take place. It's a little over 5 minutes complete, so we have about 12 minutes to go before that deorbit burn is complete. Again, we're expecting it to last a total of 17 and a half minutes. Following deorbit and splashdown, Crew 10 will have spent 148 days in space, orbiting the Earth more than 2,300 times, traveling more than 62.7 million statute miles. The crew saw the arrival of 5 visiting vehicles since their arrival in March when they docked to the space station, and this included the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft that carried NASA astronaut Johnny Kim to the station, SpaceX's 32nd commercial resupply mission, the 4th private astronaut flight, Axiom Mission 4, the Russian Progress 92 cargo spacecraft, and of course, the most recently, the arrival of the Dragon spacecraft carrying Crew 11. They also saw the departure of 6 visiting vehicles, including Northrop Grumman's 21st cargo resupply Cygnus spacecraft, the Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft that returned NASA astronaut Don Pettit back to Earth, SpaceX's 32nd commercial resupply mission, the 4th private astronaut flight, Axiom Mission 4, and the Russian Progress 90 cargo spacecraft. And following the completion of Crew 10 with splashdown later today, NASA astronaut and Crew 10 commander Anne McClain will have spent 352 total days in space across 2 flights, having previously spent 204 days in space during expeditions 58 and 59. And then JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi will have spent 263 days in space across his 2 flights to station. And then, of course, this was the first flight for both NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, so they will have both logged 148 days in space. And we are now about 7 minutes into the duration of the deorbit burn, about 10 more minutes to go until that is completed. During their stay aboard the International Space Station, both NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers conducted one spacewalk outside the orbiting laboratory. That spacewalk totaled 5 hours and 44 minutes. McClain has now conducted 3 spacewalks through the duration of her career for a total of 18 hours and 52 minutes spent outside the International Space Station.
Yeah, Anna, you mentioned seeing all the different vehicles that came to the space station while the crew was on board. If you haven't been following along with some of the crew members, like Nichole Ayers, she's been posting, and she actually posted after Crew 11 arrived at the space station, showed some really cool views of both Dragon Endurance and Dragon Endeavour, both docked to the International Space Station. Also, some cool spacewalk photos there you can see on your screen, and that is Nichole Ayers performing that spacewalk, which is really awesome.
And so she performed that spacewalk alongside her crewmate, NASA astronaut Anne McClain. And during that spacewalk, they did some preparation for a future IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, and those are being added to the International Space Station's existing solar arrays to increase the power generation and output for the space station.
Yeah, something that sometimes people don't know is that the astronauts are not only scientists, but they are also mechanics. They fix things. They have to go. Spacewalk sounds like maybe that's something fun to go out and do, but they're really going out there to fix something or install something new, which I think is really cool that they have all these very diverse skills that they're able to utilize. They're really the jack of all trades.
They really do have to be the jack of all trades. And of course, if you look at their backgrounds, they have engineering backgrounds, they have science backgrounds, but they have to be able to support all of those science and research investigations. And there, currently on your screen, you actually see a photo of the Expedition 73 crew. It looks like they're all gathered together, sharing a meal inside the International Space Station. And so 11 International Space Station crew members in that photo gather inside the Unity module for a portrait. In the front row from left are Kimiya Yui of JAXA, or the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, Zena Cardman of NASA, Oleg Platonov of Roscosmos, and Mike Fink of NASA. And then in the second row are Nichole Ayers of NASA, Sergei Ryzhikov of Roscosmos, Anne McClain of NASA. And then in the back are Takuya Onishi of JAXA, Kirill Peskov of Roscosmos, and Johnny Kim of NASA, along with Alexei Zubritsky of Roscosmos. And right now we are about 10 minutes into the deorbit burn, over halfway complete with that burn, about 7 minutes to go until it is completed, setting Crew-10 and Dragon up for their re-entry into Earth's atmosphere a little bit after that.
Yeah, and that deorbit burn should complete around the 36-minute mark on that time to splashdown clock on the bottom center of your screen. But we will wait for confirmation to call that, but it should be around that 36-minute mark.
So here in this photo, 6 of 7 Expedition 73 crew members also posed for another portrait during dinner time at the galley inside the International Space Station's Unity module. Clockwise from bottom are JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers, along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Ryzhikov, Kirill Peskov, and Alexei Zubritsky. So, of course, 4 of those crew members are returning today as part of Crew-10.
It's cool to see that they're still gathered around a table, even in space. But
most people are familiar with the idea of a mission patch, but you might not know how they come to exist. For decades, crew members have worked together to develop the patch for their mission, determining which aspects of the mission they want to highlight and any special details they'd like to include. The crew themselves can design their patch, or they can share their design ideas with an artist who makes it come to life. The Crew-10 patch is a 10-sided patch with the Roman numeral X boldly in the center, representing the 10th operational flight of the Dragon crew spacecraft. The Dragon, which is also the spacecraft's namesake, is depicted with its wings out in full flight, representing the 4 professional pilots that make up the crew complement. The Dragon is also illuminated by one of Earth's stunning and beautiful sunrises. It is focused on the International Space Station and its mission while keeping a watchful position above Earth. The stars on the patch are red, white, and blue for the flag colors of each crew member's home country, and the brightest stars represent the crew's closest family members and support system.
Yeah, I love these patches. The detail that goes into them is so amazing. Almost every single stitch on them means something, and I love that the crew is able to come together and come up with a design that means something to them.
Yeah, it's always a meaningful experience that all has some sort of meaning and inspiration drawn from all areas of their life. Again, that deorbit burn is still underway. We're just under 13 minutes into the burn's duration. That burn expected to last 17 and a half minutes total. So just a few minutes to go there, and we're seeing some great live views again inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, which is carrying the Crew-10 members home, and you can see them actually monitoring the burn there on their screens. There in the center of your screens, of course, you have NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers, the commander and pilot, respectively, of the Crew-10 mission.
And again, we are currently in that deorbit burn. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner that graphic showing the 4 bulkhead thrusters firing, all at different times. It takes a sequence of those thrusters firing to complete each and every burn. And again, this is the last time that these 4 bulkhead thrusters will be firing. Once this deorbit burn is complete, we'll start preparing the spacecraft for re-entry, and that'll come with closing the nose cone, so those thrusters will no longer be needed for the rest of their journey back home.
And you mentioned the nose cone, which will be closed. So the nose cone was initially opened following launch and orbital insertion of Crew-10. So when they first got to orbit, the nose cone was open to expose those guidance and navigation sensors on its way to the International Space Station. So it's been open this whole time as Dragon Endurance has been docked to the International Space Station. So once it closes, it'll be the first time that it's been closed since their launch and orbital insertion back on March 14th earlier this year.
Yeah, and in earlier Dragon spacecraft days, we did jettison the nose cone, but with reusability, this is one of the key improvements for reusing these Dragon spacecraft is being able to reuse the nose cone. So now we close the nose cone. It's not really needed during re-entry, but it is needed during ascent, during launch for the spacecraft. So being able to reuse it, close it when it comes back home, and then rinse and repeat.
And so we are about 15 minutes into that deorbit burn, less than 3 minutes remaining in that burn duration. You can see at the bottom right corner of your screen those thrusters continuing to fire for this burn to set it up for its entry and splashdown off the coast of San Diego, California, about 38 minutes from now, as you can see that countdown on your screen.
A great live view inside of the spacecraft. You could see some of those patches that were on near the seats of the spacecraft, showing the different crews that have flown on Dragon Endurance.
And right next to the thrusters on the bottom right hand of your screen, you can also see a map or a globe that shows where Dragon currently is. So right now it's off the coast of Australia as it continues to make its way off the coast of California. And there's less than 2 minutes remaining in the burn. The crew settled in and getting ready for their re-entry.
We are coming up on completion of that deorbit burn, expected in less than a minute from now. We will wait for confirmation.
And there you can see a good look in between NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nichole Ayers over the shoulder as they monitor that burn on either side, the right and left screens. You can actually see those thrusters firing on their screens as well. And in the center, you can see a map of their trajectory to head off the coast of California for their splashdown near San Diego.
Yeah, as we've been mentioning, this is a fully autonomous vehicle, so they're just monitoring, and they are hearing noises inside of the spacecraft, so being able to see what's going on outside of the spacecraft helps them understand what those sounds are.